Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Michael, portrait artist from Perth, Western Australia, and it's great to have your company. This week I'm painting Bevan. His eyes really did get me on this one, and that's what I really worked on trying to capture. I used my same limited palette, titanium white, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. I'm using pyro ribbon as the red and Bermuda yellow as my yellow, and then I mix 60% of ultramarine blue with 40% of burnt umber to get the black that I'm using. So with that limited palette, we can create great effects. But without further ado, let's get to the easel and let's paint.
Well, here we are on the palette. I've already just started to mask this piece in. So what I'm actually doing, I've actually mixed a bit of black, which is my usual black, 60% ultramarine blue, and then 40% of my burnt umber. And I'm marking just in, I'm just cutting around his shoulder there. There's actual mountain in the background just behind Bevan. This is actually his home, his homeland, up there in the Pilbara. And the actual distant mountain, you can actually see if you look at the painting on the right, the completed work, that is where his wife is from. So I'm painting this in black. Also, it's a little bit difficult on the camera. I don't even have the best camera yet, but I will get a better one. I just laid some reds in there as well. A little bit difficult to see on the screen, but then actually in the real photograph or the real painting, it does show up. You notice now that I've just moved across to the left. Sorry about the glare, I forgot to put the shield up. I've got a window in my studio, and when I first started, it was a lovely cloudy day. We had no glare coming as ever, and the clouds moved as I started to paint and put that glare off. So the glare keeps disappearing as I keep moving my body around painting it in, so sorry about that. But what I'm doing here, and I think this is just a bit of landscape, and you see I'm just rolling that brush to get those abstract brush marks. My paints, as usual, is my colours. So my blacks is the 60% ultramarine blue and 40% burnt umber. So I've got my titanium white, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. I've got my red on there, and I've got my yellow on the palette as well. That's all I use. I think when you're doing portrait paintings, you can, if you start off with very limited colors, using a very limited color palette, it actually helps with the color harmony, because all those colors tend to go into your mixes, which is fantastic. And you see I've just moved across onto the right, and you see that brush, it is a filbert, it's a number 5 filbert that I'm using, and I've got a few of them lined up, by the way. I'm just switching them for different colors. And when you see me dab like that, what I'm actually doing is splaying the fibers of the filbert out, so it actually pushes some of that new color into the existing color that's on the board, and as I'm pulling it off, it's actually pulling some of the old color into the new color, so I don't have to worry about any blending or anything like that. So I don't actually go in and start softly blending anything. You know, I always like it to be fairly rugged what I'm doing, as I just cut in, and I'm just really, this is just the reds that I got, and what I did, I actually just mixed the red and the yellow, so that giving my orange, and then I've just used the burnt umber to darken it down. I've kept the blues out of there, obviously, and that's what I've done. And then once I lighten it, I just add a little bit of titanium white, or a little bit more yellow. A little bit more yellow will give it a more of a brownie tinge to it, and if I get a little bit more white in there, the white will mix with the reds and give me a little bit more pinky tinge to it. So that's how I'm actually doing it. And I'm just taking those brush strokes and just filling it in. A dramatic change in colour as I get the purpley colours here. Now this is when the blues do come in. This is just simply the red. Pyro red is, by the way, what I'm using. And the ultramarine blue. And then whites mixed in there as well. And I've just changed the ratio of the reds and the blues around just to give me the effect. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just following that skyline for the drama that I want in there, and just mixing some of those darker colours in with the lighter colours. And you see I'll just work up the board. I tend to work quite short strokes. I won't work from one side of the canvas all the way across, because I want variation. If you keep your brush strokes fairly short in relative to the distance, you know, from one side to the other, what you'll find is the unevenness, if that's a word, of these brush strokes actually all mix in. And it gives you contrast and variations and lots of that stuff for your, as I always say, for your eyes to grip on. You don't want to smooth this thing out. You want to mix it up, and that's a great idea. You saw me go on one side of the canvas to the other side. By the way, the canvas is 20 inches by 20 inches. This one is a stretch canvas on a frame. I've put the actual finished painting on the right hand side just so you can see the progress we go to. So the first thing I do, because I always work dark to light, I've gone to the hat. Now this is a felt hat, and I want to get that feeling of felt, but you can't paint felt, you know, it's just not going to work for you. So the only way to get it is to just change the values, change the lights and the darks. So you'll see I'll do the dark brim first, so I've got a bit of a contrast and something for the eyes to actually fix onto, and then I'll come around and shape it around the side of his head here. And again, I'm using a dark color. Portrait painting just never gets old. By the way, I've got a collection of his photos. We did a photo shoot, so I've got a whole collection sitting over on the right hand side of me. The most important thing, and I think this is the same with still lifes, is you're trying to find that center of interest. And in this one, definitely his eyes. So everything I'm doing, I don't want to distract from the eyes. And this comes more apparent. His shirt down below, I put all these little marks on. I was going to give him a light colored checkered shirt that he was wearing on the day, and then realized that when I painted it, it distracted from him. It's distracted from his center of interest, which is his eyes. So I end up rubbing all the paint off, and you'll see that later. And I painted the dark shirt over the top. Not a good idea painting darks over lights with oil paints, but can be done. Anyway, it's just not as easy. So here again, I'm just changing the values of the paint as I work around. Very, very short marks. And this is going to help with that illusion that this is felt. I'm not trying to paint felt. I just know that if I do short marks and don't blend them too much, and I do more dabby strokes, roll that brush around, change the value as I come around his hat, it's not only going to give you the light to dark, but because all my strokes are different, you know, because I'm never going to place the brush exactly the same way every single time. And I'm certainly not going to try and do that. So I'll press the fibers of the brush or the bristles of the brush in, and I'll pull them out. And what happens is it's pulling and pushing those paints together, the different values together. And once I've finished one side, I'll just simply move across to the other side. I want to get the hat done. I want to do the background and the hat and get it all framed out so that I've got something to work with. And by the way, I do also apologize for the camera positioning, and I'm going to be working on that as I've realized I've just got boards on the back and I hang everything up when I paint. This painting I actually hung too far left, so it was more suitable for me rather than you watching. So next time I'll push it further to the right, and what I'll do, keep me more out of the frame, and you'll get to see more of the painting. And I will remember to put the screen up, so we'll block that glare. Yes, how annoying. Never mind, these things happen. One thing about portrait painting that I will say, the portrait is for the client. So, you know, this one I just sketched in. I've just done some pencil sketching. It's not that accurate. The eyes are about in the right height position and probably spaced out. But if you look at the eyes I've sketched as I paint this hat, if you look at his eyes, you go, oh, geez, Michael, they're not very good at all. No, I just want to virtually get the rough positioning of them. Here you go. You can see that definite contrast of the value there of the next sort of paint coming in. This is just pure burnt umber with white and a little touch of that Bermuda yellow that I love to use. I do love to use that. And you see I'll just dab it around, and very short strokes again. And I'm constantly just loading this brush up and making sure there's not a lot of blending, just a bit of dabbing going on. And so it looks quite rough, but as we get to the end of it, it actually smooths it. Your eyes smooth it out for me. I don't have to smooth it. Your eyes will smooth it out. Of course, obviously, if you get critical and you start really looking at the painting on the right hand side, you can actually see those brush marks. You can actually see that it's not smooth, that it's wrinkly and it's all over the place. But as people step back, the eyes will smooth it out for you, and the eyes will tell them that this is a felt hat. And Bevan always wears this hat. He's an old rodeo guy, so always wears that hat. Anyway, so that is that. Yes, so whereas with the eyes, yes, so you'll notice on the drawing, and then you go to the right hand side, you say, well, those eyes aren't quite in the right position, definitely not painted, definitely not drawn in that accurately. The lips look terrible from the sketch. But all I'm trying to do is just position stuff, and I think you have to give yourself a little bit of latitude for movement, knowing what's important. The important part is that the lips, the center of the lips, in the right space, the width is correct, a bit of wrong on the shape, doesn't matter. But as long as it's in the right place, the chin line's in the right place, the ear, we'll do a little bit more adjusting to his ear that I've drawn. You can't see it at the moment. And for the felt on top, you'll see this rolling motion I'm doing in the brush. So I've changed the value. I've got a really dark value. May look too dark to start off with. And this is another thing I always say to people, when you put your values in, especially darks, especially on this hat, you may have looked at that first dark value I put in and go, oh my goodness, that's way, way too dark. And it's got a bit of yellow in there as well, but that's okay. You'll notice, and then I roll some darks around the hat. I only want them there so as I come over with the lights and the darks will mix, and that will give me the effect that I'm after, and it will look more like a felt hat without even trying. And I've seen people do this with palette knives, and they'll just put the darks, just splodge it with the palette knife dark, and then come back with palette knife with light over the top, really short jabby motions, and before you know it, you're going, how did he create that? This is how they actually do it. Looks a bit messy at the moment. Don't get worried about mess or anything like that. Messier the better. Messier the better. And you'll notice that with the shirt. When we get to the shirt, the messier we can paint this shirt, the better. Now it's amazing, you can see all the lumps and bumps, but as I fill the gaps in, as I get rid of the canvas, the blank canvas, and I just brush it over, and I'm not trying to blend, I'm just filling in the gaps, do a little bit of dabbing, put that light where I want it, just so I just cut that brim, so we get a nice finish, and there we go, it's done. And you saw when it was zoomed in how rough it was in just that split second. But when you look at the painting on the right, because it's taken from a distance, it's all blended in and you get that lovely felt effect. Now, the one on the right is the actual photograph of the painting. This is the video camera, and the glare is obviously affecting the color. But it's pretty close. You can see what's going on, which is the important part. This next bit, because we're working from dark to light, there's that distinctive shadow under him, but I want you to notice how rough I make that shadow edge. Now, you may say, but a cap or a hat or anything should produce a nice smooth shadow line. Yeah, you'd expect it if it's curved. We'd have a nice curve going on his forehead there. Don't do that. This is another thing I say, photographs are only a reference. They're not the actual, that won't make your painting work. So we know for the shadows to work on his face, I need to make that line totally uneven. Look how jagged it is. I'm not following the hat verbatim. I know it rises and falls, but I've made the darks in there really jagged line, no curve. Do not make the mistake of going, it's a curved hat, so it's shadow. And if you look at the photograph and you see a beautiful curved shadow, don't do that. Cut it back, and if you want to get some more, just change the value a little bit. It's going to look more realistic for you. So the darkest points are definitely uneven, and then I will, as I come down with the lighter, you'll see how I do that. So what I want to do here, I'm constantly looking at the photo references. I've got about 5 photos up, and I'm really looking at is just one eye, and all I'm looking for is the shape around this eye. So I know the eye that I've drawn is at the right height, and I know it's at the right width from the other eye. The eye itself may not be drawn perfectly, or the eyelid may not be drawn perfectly, and that's okay. That doesn't matter. I've got it in the right spot. So it allows me to build very small brush marks around it. This is one of the things about portrait painting. You don't want to have very big, broad brush strokes, unless you just block, unless you're a person who blocks in first and then starts cutting back. But the smaller brush strokes give you more texture, because you're pushing, you're pulling. It allows you to change the values slightly. Here I'm just really taking my time to just look at the eye, and I'm just comparing one to the other. And I'll continue to push and pull this eye until I get it to where I want it. And I'll just grab myself a drink. Oh, beautiful water. Love having that nice fresh water to drink. So the eye even may look wrong to you, only because the canvas, so here you see I've just changed the value here, and I'm really studying, where does that actually in relation to the top of that eye. And you notice when I paint, I don't stay in one spot for too long. The goal of this is to cover the canvas without worrying about correcting. Because if you chase yourself correcting, everything looks wrong. And you'll see that as we go on, you'll be going, whoa, that colour's way off. And then when the other colours go around it and it blends in, you kind of go, oh, it's not. No, it's not. So look at that eye, look how rough. Now I've actually just put the eye in there as well, in that right-hand eye. By looking at the reference photo, seeing the size, it doesn't look like anything, does it? Because of all the shadowing, it doesn't look like you see me draw across there. That's so I'm getting the bottom of the eyes in the same position. You actually see some great masters and their eyes don't line up, but they're masters and they can get away with it. I'm not, and I can't. And we shouldn't really want to. So again, all I'm doing is really looking at his eye. One thing I will say about eyes, they're never round. I mean, I know when you look at someone, the eye is round, but when you're painting, be brave. None of I don't think I've ever painted someone's eye perfectly round. It's just not in me. I believe that when you look at someone, because their eyes are moving constantly, that their eyes just never really appear perfectly round anyway. They can be a little bit lopsided, a little bit steeper on one side, shallower on the other side, the angles coming down. They can have some hard edges on there, you can have lost edges on there, and so you'll see I'm just now you can actually see I'm putting some reds in there, so I'm introducing the reds into the blacks, and slowly just, once I've got those eyes in, I need to give myself a break. It's a bit like when they used to say you go snowblind. You look at snow for too long and all of a sudden everything's just sparkly and your eyes don't work, or you stare at the sun too long and you try and look away and every time you blink. Eyes are the same, and so is painting's the same. So, I have found personally, I don't know about the people watching, that once I've done a section, I'll actually switch completely over to a different section, look at a different blank, look at the shapes, and all I'm really looking for is saying, okay, that is a reddish color. What is the shape? What shape? And if I can't get a shape, because sometimes when you're looking at a photograph of a painting or a portrait of somebody, sometimes it's difficult to see the shape. I think that's an art form that comes with more and more practice. But even I sometimes look at some photographs and I can see a color and going, where does it start? Where does it end? It's sometimes a little bit difficult to see. So I'll just know that a color goes in a certain spot, and what I'll do is I'll just put it in the spot. I'll say, look, it goes about in here, and I'll paint that color and that value. Value is more important. The color's virtually got nothing to do with it. That's why you see people do weird colors on portraits and they get away with them, but they look good, eh? Me, I'm a bit more of a realistic, abstract realism. I don't want it to be a photograph. So yeah, if I see a value or colour and I can't quite see the shape that it is at that particular point in time because the eyes just aren't working that well, happens to all, I'll just put it in there. I'll just put a smudge of the value into this area and around the area that I think it should go, and then as I come back to it, it's amazing. I start looking at other colours and other values around that spot and put them in. It all seems to work. I do have a habit of twisting and pulling my brush. I'll change how I hold the brush depending on what I'm doing. But as I'm drawing straight lines, I like to twist. Now you see I've just moved straight across to a totally different area. I'm just filling in canvas I'm looking at the photo references. I'm trying to work out what that should look like on Bevan's face here. I'm thinking to myself, you know, if that was in shadow there, and this is a shadow line coming down, I don't want it straight. His face isn't flat, it's curved. So by not having any of this or any of these lines perfect, you see I'm really squashing the bristles there, trying getting some texture on there, trying to get some unevenness on there. I just don't want smoothness. I don't want nice edges. I want it, as I heard Mark Carter once say, just paint ugly. And you know, he's dead right. Paint ugly, because that is the best thing you can actually be doing for yourself. Ugly, the better. You'll see that when we come to a shirt, and down below, you'll really see, you'll kind of go, whoa, that does not look like a shirt. And slowly as we build up, it all works. So you see I've got that shape happening there now, and I'm just trying to just feel my way. I'm looking at the reference photos, I'm looking at how his head is shaped, and I'm imagining a shadow coming down here, and look how rough that is as it comes down. It is certainly not a nice smooth curve, and you don't want a nice smooth curve. Well, I don't. I don't think they look as realistic. I don't think they look as interesting. I don't think it gives the eyes anything to grip on. And that's what we want. You know, someone's eyes, when they're looking at a painting, if it's not all blendy and all smoothed out, and patterns on the face aren't, you know, perfect nice curves, and there's mottling going on, and there's rough brushwork going on, their eyes, when they look at your work, smooth it out for you. That's what happens. So I call it gripping, and it gives the eye something to grip on. It actually makes them pause, to stop, and as they look around your painting, it becomes really, really interesting. And they may not know why it's interesting, but the fact you've given the eyes something to grip on, something the eyes to fix, because things aren't perfect in your painting, you're a little bit rough, you know, the edges aren't nice and neat, you're giving the eyes something to work on, and the eyes will fix it, and they'll be busy fixing, and that keeps them looking longer. So, a bit hard to see as I'm painting, but if you look on the painting on the right, you can actually see the finished article of what I'm actually doing here. But you can certainly see that even that shadow line coming down isn't a nice arced shadow line. It just isn't. It just doesn't work that way. You know, I'll leave bristle marks and bits, and I'll just go and finish a little bit off in there, just putting a little bit of red into those shadows. Because there's so much red in here, you can get away with a lot on this one. I can get the blacks painted in black, and then go push red on top of the blacks, and it gives a lovely effect. And it actually saves me mixing it on the palette. It's kind of mixing the paint on the canvas, and you can get away with a lot when you do that, because it doesn't mix perfectly and makes that more and more interesting to look at. So this painting, I think it took me until I did it in a couple of sessions, and it was probably about 4 or 5 hours in total of actual painting. So I sat down a couple of sessions to do this one. The background and the sky and the hat, they're pretty easy because there's not as much shifts going on. The face just takes longer because every mark's just a small mark. It's not big brush strokes. I'm not going anywhere. And because, you know, you can paint, and some people do blocking, so they'll block the whole thing in, get some basic shapes down, the lights and shadows. Then they'll come back and do what they call modeling. So then they get to really what they want to. Then they'll come in and then do the fine detail over the top. And they'll use fast drying paints. I use very slow drying paints. My paints, I'm using linseed oil as my medium, by the way. Someone did ask me what medium I was using. I use linseed oil, and I'll actually put a drop of clove oil into my linseed oil. The clove oil, just a drop in there. So I've got my little container that I put my linseed oil. I'll put a drop, maybe 2 drops of clove oil in there, stir it up. The clove oil is just, it just slows down the drying, and I've never had an issue with it. The idea came off some internet stuff I was reading one time. I know Mark Carter's paints have clove oils in them, and they slow down the drying process. And I've seen quite a few people actually mix linseed oil and just put a couple of drops of clove oil as well to slow it down. For this alla prima, trying to, well, say alla prima is meant to be painted in one session. I think I painted this in 2 sessions. I think definitely you'll see me actually change my jumper so it'll stand out like anything. I like my little hoodies that I'm wearing, but I do actually change it on this one. But yeah, so here you go. I'm now starting to fill in here. So clove, by the way, clove oil, a couple of drops just in with my linseed oil. I don't use mineral terps. I don't clean my brushes in mineral terps. I simply drop my brushes into linseed oil, and I've got linseed oil mixed with clove oils and all nicely mixed up in there, and that's what I drop my brushes into. I don't clean brushes. Call it lazy, but I don't like cleaning them. What it does do sometimes, though, I must admit, some of my brushes, I've left them in there for a while, they got a bit splayed on the end, so I will actually smooth them out, let them, give them with some soap. I just use soap, clean them, and let dry. You can see by being that forehead, and I've just put those tiny little marks in. Yeah, it's slow, but now you can start to see why the lumps and the bumps are appearing, because I can get it and I go, oh, there'd be a little bit of highlight, and I can pop it in there. Now the whites of the eyes, let me just get a drink. Now the whites of the eyes are never white. These have got a lot of red in them and a lot of blue in here. And you see I'm just touching them in. I'm actually being careful as I put them in here, because I don't want to ruin what I've actually put down. I'm not actually too fussed about the eye. Sometimes happy accidents happen, but I don't want these bright white. If you ever look at the painting on the right hand side, you can go, oh wow, look how bright they are, but they're actually not. Now you can actually see it in as it's forming and say they're really dark. The reason they're brightened up is because I put dark around them, and you see I'm just finishing off under his eye there. So I think sometimes people make eyes too big. What you're actually seeing as I'm painting, the eyes look quite small, you know, the actual eye itself that I've painted in there, and it may look like, oh, they're not big enough. That's another problem I've seen, or another fault I see with people. They do make the eyes too big sometimes, and eyes are deceptive. They may look bigger than what they are, only because of, you know, the eyelid hanging on the top tends to take the top off, but because we got that curve underneath, sometimes that can deceive your eye into thinking that the eye itself is a little bit bigger than what it is. The eye there, he's got blacky brown eyes, and I just put a little dab of white in there and smeared it in just to get some light edges. There's a bit more of a zoom in. I've just changed the camera position. Still got that nasty glare. Never mind. Yeah. Oh, by the way, you can, if you have a look at the shirt now I've zoomed in, you can see all the little squares that I drew. I was going to do his checkered shirt, and it's kind of a white shirt, a very, very pale checkered. And I'm drawing that, and I'm thinking, yeah, this will be good. I'll draw all these little squares. That'll give me a bit of a roadmap of what I'm going to do. I actually painted it and then went, oh, Michael, it's too bright. You know, so it's taking away from the centre of interest, which it's busy, you know. And I want the eyes, that I want you to be looking at his eyes and going, oh, wow, you know, what is he thinking about here? So so I do change it. But now you can see what I actually did. I actually did some sketching, some little squares, just to give me an idea of what I was going to do. And you notice, if you see there, I've sketched those squares showing me the shape of the shirt. But anyway, that's that. Now, down the side of people's faces is always what's called reflective light. And that's what I'm going to put in now. If you look at the paint, you'll see how bright it is, but you see it's not actually that bright. It's just a different value, you know, it's probably about 3 values, 4 values away from the actual black, but it's certainly not white. But as we get the darks around it, it brightens it up. What I want is that reflective light. So you'll always get that on one, sometimes on both sides of the face, but on this one I really wanted to emphasize it. And what it allows me to do is separate the face from Bevan's mountain that's just over his left shoulder as we look at it on the screen. Obviously on our right hand side, but it's over his left shoulder. Now here comes a point. Now I really want to make a point of here. I'm actually now starting to paint the nose. I've actually decided I'll move around a little bit. I'm trying to map it. I'm really trying to look at his painting. So his photographs. Sorry, on the left hand side of me, I've got these 5. I'm really looking at his nose. Very small marks is what's important. But what you're going to see as I build this, I'm bringing some reds in now. Initially, these reds are going to look terrible. And this is where you can't second guess yourself, guys. It really, you know, I've matched the color. I know it's the color. I know it's the right value, and I'm going to put it in here. But as I build this red on the screen, it's going to look shocking. It's going to look way, way too red. And this is an important thing to remember when you're doing painting, is that you can't always trust your eyes. You just have to trust that I've done some color matching. I've got the color of his nose from his photographs. I've double checked on 3 or 4 of them, gone, that's his color, that's the value, that's how bright or dark it is. That's what value is, how light or dark something is. And now I'm just going to place it in to where I see it. Now, I'm not too sure on the shapes as I'm doing this. I'll develop them. I'm going to put some darks alongside it and see what happens. And that is all I am doing. But look how wrong it looks. Even I'm looking at the screen as I'm recording this for you. And even myself are going, is you got that right, Michael? But that's what it is, eh? That's painting for you. So again, I've got my filbert. So I'm using number 5 filberts for this whole thing here. I normally like larger filberts. I don't know why I'm not using a larger one, but that's okay. As they say, when you get used to painting, this is something I will say, is that your brushes are not important. They're really not. You don't need expensive brushes. I know people that paint with basically house brushes, and the effects they get is absolutely incredible. I've seen people, you know, one of my artists that I follow, Richard Musgrove Evans, g'day Richard, yeah, he paints with his palette knife, and a big palette knife, not a little one like I use for mixing paints. He's like using trowels, and incredible what he can do. So it's so your brushes aren't that important, and if you buy cheap brushes, you can just buy tons of them, you know, as many as you want. And I experiment with some brushes. I see some on special, I go buy them. If I don't like them because they're not tight enough or they're not shaped right, I'll just trim the loose hairs off. Sometimes they've got hairs, you know, stick out. I just trim them up a little bit and then just see what happens to them. Some are better than others, but no, you don't need to go buying expensive brushes. So here I've tried to, I'm just mapping out that right hand cheek and just having a look at where these darks are and trying to just position, you know, see he's got a dark mark, so I'm just putting these tiny little marks in. And this is, I think, where if you're starting portrait painting, the temptation is to do big marks, and they're not big. They certainly aren't. Look how tiny that mark is I've just put in there. And I've just found a colour, not quite sure of its shape, so I'll put it in and then I'll come back around it with another value and I'll just slowly build it up. These very small marks with value shifts is what you're looking for. You know, I think in the forehead, there's 16 value shifts in that forehead. And it's the same in the face. And we're not talking color shifts now, we're just talking of value shifts as I'm going from the blacks into the reds and the browns and mixing them up. So yeah, it's there's 16 in there, and I think just in the face, I think I had about 20 something value shifts all mixed on my palette as I went along. And that's not counting when I just painting some color and go, oh, that needs a little bit of red in there, it needs a little bit of yellow in there, or I wouldn't mind seeing a little blue dubbed in there, and I'll just put that in, give it a bit of a pat around and let it just settle and rest there. And when you do that, it's like, oh wow, yeah, it starts to form. As you see, as I'm building it, before we had anything underneath the eye, even me looking at the screen, you know, I would have said those eyes look a little bit small. So you're really having to trust you're gauging, you're measuring with your brush, you're measuring with your bristles, go, no, that's the right size. And as the face grows, it's this optical illusion, so do the eyes. The eyes seem bigger in the painting on my right hand side than when I'm actually painting, but what I'm actually painting is that painting. So, and as the darkness comes in, the eyes will start to lighten up, the whites of the eyes start to lighten up as well. Just remember, whites of eyes are never white. they've always got the blues and the browns. So if I'm doing eyes, I normally would start with titanium white, put some ultramarine blue in there, and then definitely some burnt umber to kill the blue. These had more of a reddy tinge, so it's just titanium white, but put the red in there, put a little bit of yellow in there, and a little bit of ultramarine blue just to knock everything down. No, sorry, not ultramarine blue, burnt umber, just to knock everything down. And you see, I'm just moving on. Again, the nose looks very, very red. I'm doing value shifts as I go, very, very small marks as I'm just mapping out the shape of his nose. Well, if you guys want to ask me anything about portrait painting, you want to make some comments on my portrait painting, please feel free. Always open to comments. One thing I will say is that when you paint portraits, you're painting them for you, for yourself first off. And then when you're getting clients and you're painting them for family, friends, and then paying clients, it's for them. So the whole work you're doing is for the person. You want the person to look at that and love it. So that's the name of the game. How you do that and how you achieve it, how you get your drawing on. I sketch by hand. I love sketching my things by hand. Some people trace, some people use a projector. I really don't care how you get the drawing on. I think if you get a drawing, what you're really looking for in a portrait is get those eyes at the right height in proportion to everything else and getting the right widths apart. So I'm virtually putting the center of those eyes down, so the height and the width of little crosses normally. And then you see I've just sketched around roughly to give me an idea. The nose, I'll normally get the height of the nose or the bottom of the nose from that bridge line. The width I'll just mark out, but it's fairly easy to mark the width of a nose out because you can just work from the eyes. You can have a look at a photograph and look up and go, that's in line with that. Draw it down with a brush and go, okay, so that's the width there. And you do that on either side, and then you've got it. And the same with the mouth width. It's very easy. You're just coming from the eye line and dropping a vertical line down and going, so that's the corner of the mouth at the, if I look at the painting, and if you looked at the painting now, we look at it together, the left-hand side as we look at it, and you draw the line, you can see, the corner of the mouth is on the edge of the actual shape of his eye. The right-hand side is, it's more in the center of that eye because the face is slightly twisted. Okay, so then I've got my widths, and then of course the chin line and everything else. So you see the redness seems to disappear from the nose the more we build the nose. And again, some people say, it doesn't look right, it may look a little bit off center, but it won't. It just corrects itself. So you're just putting those marks where you want them, and filling in the blank canvas. So alla prima is meant to mean, painting one go. And I said I painted this in a couple of sessions, as you can tell, because I've changed my jumper. But it's still wet in wet. So I'm not painting and then going back over. So when I put down a mark and I put down a value and I put down a color, it has to be the right color, has to be the right value for where it's going. It takes longer to paint it in one way, and then it's quicker in another, because as I'm painting, I'm finishing. But someone who blocks in, leaves it for a day, comes in, does the modeling, leaves it for a day, comes back and does the final bits. They can actually paint quicker than I can in session times, but then they've got 3 sessions going on. This was done in 2, and I said, and I actually timed this one, and it was about, it was almost 5 hours of painting. But when that mark is in, that mark is finished, and that's a big difference. And I like to paint this way. I'm not someone who does the modeling and start putting all down. And I don't work, there's some people there that do alla prima, and I've got friends that do it, and they're amazing. They will do just a wash, they'll start blocking in, come over the top model, and they build a painting up, they don't do what I do. They'll actually just paint the whole face, then go back in and start cutting it down and cutting the shapes, putting the darks, and it's I find it fascinating to watch them. It's not my style of doing it. I prefer this style where I'm just looking and just, I want that chin lining now, because I've realized that I might be going off a little bit and going, I don't want this painting to get too long in the face. So I'll just pop in where I've marked the chin height should be. And I kind of need to do that because of my drawings, not the best drawing in the world. The heights are right and the positions are right, but then because it's a rough hand sketch, I need to actually make sure that when I'm putting paint down, I'm not actually going too long with it. I'm actually making sure that it looks correct. Once again, and look, so that movement you see with the brush pushing, so I've got a lighter value against a darker value. So by pushing, what happens is as I've said before, the bristles on the brush open up. So small parts of this new color, new value, go into the darker value that's next to. And as I lift the brush, the bristles come back together and they drag some of that darker value into my lighter value. And I found it's a great, so I don't have to blend, and yet it won't give me the hard edge as if I just painted, a paint against a color against a color or value against. I won't get that hard edge. By pushing, the edge is there, but the subtlety of the mixture is also there. I don't do it all the time, but I do it when I want something to push and mush into something else, if that's a good way of saying it. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying this one. I'd say Bevan's an interesting subject. The camera that I'm using is just a cheap GX4. I'm certainly not a photographer, but I've got a Godox off-market flash. If anyone's interested, I'll do a little video of a photo shoot if you like. I just take a heap of photos, and then I come back to the studio. I get the look that I want. Normally I'm looking through the photos for the eyes, and I'll pick the eye shot, and it's not one photo that I tend to use. It's tend to be a collection. So the eyes might be out of one photo that I've gone, that's what I want, absolutely love that. Yeah, we'll go with that now. And mouth might have been out of another, then I'll be going, oh, he got his mouth just as I want it, I'll use that. Yeah, so that's how I work. But that's how I do the photo shoots. I'll print a few photos out, I'll gloss laminate them. That way I can dab my paints again. So what I'm actually doing when I'm mixing paints, by the way, is the gloss laminated photographs. As I'm trying to get his eye, I'm dabbing the paint on there, smearing it on there, and checking for one, the value's the first. That's the critical. I want it the right light or the right darkness in there, and I'll take that. And then I'll compare the color mixture that I've got there, and I'll adjust the color, but keep the value in exactly that spot. And then sometimes I'll mix a string of them. Other times I'm going down here, I'm actually going, okay, I want these lips, and you see I'm just trying to map them out. I'm really looking to the other side now, to the photographs, and I've got a photograph with these lips on and going, okay, let me just get this shaping in here. One thing I will say, when painting lips, there's quite a lot of blue and purpley mixtures and reds in these lips, a lot going on in lips, and in everyone's lips. So I'm getting the basic shape down first, then what you're going to see, so the top lip is darker than the bottom lip. What I tend to do is, this is a red and a blue mixture, by the way, because I know I want to shift it to the purples, which means if I put a little bit of white in here, just dab a little corner of white and then smudge it in, it will actually bring that purpley look out. So that's what I'm doing. So I don't actually mix the purple, I'll actually just mix the red with the blue and get the darkest that I can, because I know I want the dark color, knowing that I'm going to come back with my titanium white just on the corner of my brush, put a few little spots through there, clean the brush, and then smooth and then smudge the whites into that mixture, and it'll highlight lighter purples. That's I've done that. As I work underneath, you'll see I do the same with the red. So when I come underneath, you might say when I first paint these lips, oh, they look very red compared to the other side. That's true. I want the red mixture in there because he's got red in his lips. And then what I want to do, because I want the purpley and the blue look, I'll come back with my ultramarine blue on the corner of my brush, dab a little bit of blues around into those reds, and I smudge them in. And amazingly, you get that purpley reddy look, and it's not even, and it's like, how did he mix that? And I didn't. I actually mixed on the actual canvas. So mixing on the canvas can give you some real advantages. All I'm trying to do at this point is cut some shapes on these lips. You'll see I'm starting to fill them in a little bit now once I've got the actual shape where I want it. And as I fill it in, you'll see how red the mixture is. So I'm using Pyro Red, by the way, or Pyro Ruben, I should say. I keep saying red, but Pyro Ruben. It's red. You use alizarin crimson, whatever. It's going to do the same thing. Yeah, so there now you can see the red. All I've done to shift it from that to what you see in the photograph is this is where I'll use my technique of putting some blue onto the corner brush, dab my blues over that red, smudge it in, and all of a sudden I've got this really interesting effect of it's purple, it's blue, it's red, and if you try to just paint it in there, I know people who can, but I can't get the effects that I want. So I know what effect I want, so that's just a technique that I use. The top of the lip I'll dab some whites in, so I know I get some little highlights going on. The bottom of the lips I'm going to dab some blues in, and you can see the distinct difference between that I painted and the actual finished article. So it's good having the finished article alongside it, so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Again, I'll move away because I don't want to spend too long in one area. I don't want to get that paint blind or snow blind, whatever you want to call it. So I just move away, which is great. It just freshens my eyes up. I do find it difficult sometimes in seeing, exact shapes if I stay too long in one area. And if that is happening to me, you'll see I will just move. And then I'm just filling in very small marks. And there's the top of his lips. It just filled in there. Very small mark. You can see I've actually done a little bit of work on those lips, but not too much. I'm waiting till I surround them before I do anything, which is really, really important, because if I tried to get the lips in the colour, in the shading and everything I actually wanted without having them surrounded by any other colour, your eyes can really play bad tricks on you. It's like the nose area, as we put more colour around, you're now looking at a nose and going, oh my goodness, it seems to be magically changing, but only because we've put other stuff around there. And now I'm just working on that chin area. I want to make sure that I get that shape of that, the knobbly bit on the end of your chin there, if that's a good way of describing it. Again, very small marks. Look at the tiny marks and look at the shapes I'm putting in. If I'm not too sure of a shape, I'll just twist the brush and leave it a rough shape in there. As long as it's not square, as long as it's not perfectly round, just smudge it in there. Come back and realize there's a little bit of shade difference. And even when there's not, I'll still do it, which is interesting. I'll put two colors together and go, I want something else just to make it more interesting. So I'll dab a lighter value in there. And I'll either do that with mixing a lighter value, or just putting a couple of spots of white and smudge in, or a couple of spots of yellow and smudge it in, or a couple of spots of red and smudge it in, and then blue and smudge it in. Here you just see I'm just cutting the bottom of the chin in. This thing's almost done. It's really come to, I was quite pleased with this. Bevan loved it, which is the most important. As long as the clients love it, that's really, really important. Yeah, and you see I'm just cut. This is what I do love about filberts. I can use the edge of the filbert to get a really nice sharp edge. I can use the flat to get what I want, the curve. They're really, really versatile, these filberts. And I say, I don't care if I buy expensive filberts, cheap filberts. I'm just looking for the bristles are nice and tight. I've used hog hair filberts. I've used synthetics. Each give you a different. I think just no one can say what's right or wrong when it comes to brushes. I think you just grab them, and if you're not buying expensive ones and you want to have a bit of a play, get some hog hair filberts, which are cheap, and then get some nylon ones that are cheap. See what you like and what effects they're going to give you, and away you go. This is what I want to say here. The highlights. I'm actually doing a little bit of work on it, but the highlight on the chin, always make it darker, and then go back in, put a little dabs of white in the center of it, and smudge it around, or mix the lighter color and smudge it around in there. But if you've got a value of a highlight and it stands on the right hand side, you can see it's lighter. But what you want to do is never get, if you're matching the color on the photograph, look at it and then make yours darker and then paint your highlighting darker, and that will allow you to come in afterwards and just put a bit of highlight in the center of your darker mark. Never try and paint the highlight in the correct highlight that it's showing on your photograph, or it's just going to look odd. So make it darker. Then you can come back in either with the lighter color or just put a couple of spots of white in there and just smudge them around and do the mixing on the canvas, which I have a habit of doing quite often if I want to get effects, and that is going to really help you. This is just his neckline now, coming into this shirt area. Yeah, the shirt I actually painted and then rubbed it all out. You actually see it'll actually be a pale, and then I had to struggle to paint dark over light because I wasn't going to let the canvas wait for 3 or 4 days for it to dry. I just wanted to paint straight on top, but it gives you an effect. Again, the neckline is just changing values, and we need them darker because there is that nice shadow coming down there. And now you'll see I'm just making the brush go in the direction that I see his neck going into. So I think that is important. I always think of which direction is the skin going, what direction is this going, and then attempt to always try to make the brush go in that direction also. Sorry, I keep getting in the way. I promise I will move the cameras. You don't realize until you're watching your videos back and going, oh, look at that. So here we are. I'm just putting in these final marks here to get his neck finished off, and he's just about done. There's a couple of dabby marks over there. Wonderful. I do actually put some darks in afterwards. So this is the shirt. Now I did actually paint the shirt, hated it, scrubbed it out, way too light. And now I have the struggle of putting darks over light, and that means you just have to not press as hard, and it's a little bit more work. But in the end, it was the lights underneath mixing with the darks. I just added some nice softness to his shirt anyway. Now this is a fabric shirt. Again, you're not going to be able to paint fabric, but now I'm going to start moving the brush in the line of the fabric, and you can see I twist and twirl. So the darks that come in, they will look terrible. You're going to be looking at them going, oh, these aren't working. But you don't worry about this. This is where I say rougher the better, or as Mark Carter would say, paint ugly now. This is really going to come in for you. You've been painting this way the whole way for the face, small marks. You're just going to do larger marks on this one. I'm just looking at shadows. I'm having to invent this because there is no shirt now. So I'm just trying to think, how can I make these shapes for the shadows a little bit interesting? How can I make these creases, if that's what you're looking at, interesting? Now, they're going to look terrible when I first do them. This is something I think that where beginners freak out about. They go, oh no, it looks too blocky, it doesn't look right. Don't worry about it. This will work out. This will work out. Your job is just basically to put some shapes down, dark as you can. This is almost black, by the way. The light color underneath, because it's not fully dark, is actually smudging into it. And there you go. And you'll see I'm just twist this brush around, twist it and twirl it, and let's just get some darks happening in there. Finish that little bit off down there. And you can see what I've done on the other side. One thing is, I do know that under a collar there'll be a dark line under a collar. Remember, I'm just making this up now because I don't have a shirt that I'm looking at. It's not his shirt on the day. That's okay. What's important is that the effect you want on your painting is what's important. You want the eyes to be the attraction piece, and the other shirt being too light, as I said, was distracting. And you can see it there. You can see the light, that pale blue contrasting against the face. Might look good when he walks into a room. Doesn't look good in my painting, so it's going. And you need to make those artistic decisions yourself as well. So I just want to show you how just by painting rough, I've actually changed the value. You can see the value is changing. And I'll do a lighter value and I'll come on either side. It depends what I'm doing. But I've got this light paint underneath that's also mixing in. And you see I just do this little, doing actually longer strokes here than I'd normally do as I follow this shoulder line down. And that's okay because this is now fabric. So fabric moves and you will get longer strokes in your fabric movement. And all I'm doing here is putting a lighter value, lighter shade, next to my darker shade. And you just see me just shape it in here as I just come along. And I'm trying to think about how the shoulder moves here. That is, you see my brush is actually moving in the direction I would be expecting the fabric to move, and I'm changing the direction because I expect the fabric, because it comes forward, because arms going down there, would actually come down. And that's all I'm doing. And that's why I'm changing the brush directions. Rough is better. Painting ugly here is going to give you a massive advantage in making the shirt look soft, and which it is, it's a soft fabric, and make it look real. Doesn't really at the moment because you've only got a couple of values down, and it's not until you start mixing the others that it's really going to take off. And you're not after perfect coverage either. That light color underneath really giving me a bit of drama, and you can see it coming through, and I'm having to go back over and just make sure that the color I want is the color that's actually happening. But the happy accents happen as well, when you're doing this sort of stuff. And you see how quickly I'm just brushing that down. I just want that coverage. But I don't want anything too smooth. I'm not looking at anything perfect now. I know that painting ugly or painting really, really rough here, not painting perfect, is what's going to work for me. And that's how fabrics of shirts are actually done. We'll move on. So there's just a little line. Happy accidents happen. Let them be. A little bit more detail as I just edge this collar out now. So I'll put the little fine line on. Now as I work upwards, because I've got the lighter colour on the brush here, it's ultramarine blue, by the way, mixed with the yellow, bismuth yellow, and burnt umber. So that's why I'm getting a greeny blue look. But because I've got paint on the brush, I'll actually start from the corner I want the intensity and then work up, because the paint's coming off the brush, I've got less, and it will allow me to get a natural fading effect, because the brush is coming off, the paint is coming off the brush, and I've got less paint to apply, so I'll get that natural blend happening. And then all it is exactly the same. Shift the values for the paint, and just paint a lighter value in there. You see how I just splodge it in there, which I don't know if splodging is a technical term for painting, but hey, yeah, you can see what I'm doing. I'm just putting marks now. This is a lighter side of his shirt, subtly lighter, but definitely lighter. And I know that the rougher I am, painting ugly, as Mark Carter would say, the more I paint ugly here, the more his shirt is going to work for you. So the more the shirt is going to work for the viewer. And remember, I'm not trying to paint, the world's best shirt either, because it's the face I want you looking at, not the shirt. I want the shirt actually just as a secondary piece, blended in there and going, oh, it actually looks like it's working. It looks like a shirt, so the eyes won't spend too much time. And I know that these marks, your eyes, when you look at it from a distance or 3 or 4 feet away, all these rough paint marks are just going to blend away. Your eyes are going to grip, gives it something to look at, makes it more interesting, and your eyes will fix any errors that are there anyway. And you see, I'm just really just sweeping it in here, but trying to follow where I believe the line of the shirt would go. This is a little bit different because like I say, I'm making it up as I go. But I think just experience tells you can imagine someone's shirt, you can imagine their chest under there, you can imagine how the fabric is falling, and just sweep your brush into the direction of the fabric. and that is where you'll get those nice crease lines and make things happen. And then all we got to do is just finish off his collar. Sorry, I blocked that out. All I'm doing is I'm just sweeping that in an upward motion. I'm just trying to smooth something out there that I didn't like. Yeah, and that is how you get fabric without having to try to paint fabric. I don't know how you paint fabric, but you know, I've seen people paint polished marble and it's real choppy brush strokes, but because all the values are right, your eye fixes it and tells you it's polished marble. The eyes fix this and say, yeah, it's soft. That's a soft material shirt. Yeah, that is a that looks like a felt hat. Now I just decided I was going to put a button here. I imagined where he was, so I just put a little bit of lightness over there and now this is important. See how I've started with a darker color? So if I just put darker down first, and then I'll build my highlights up onto that. So I won't actually just go and just put the lightest color I can. And of course I don't want it to be distracting either. So even though a button on here might have bright sparkly bit on it, we don't want that in our painting. We just want it so if you look, you go, oh, he has got a button there, and it just adds a little bit more interest. And there you go, folks. That is the finished painting. Look, thank you very much for joining me once again. It really is appreciated. I absolutely do enjoy having your company. If you've got any questions, put them below in the comments section. I'd love a like, love a follow, love you to subscribe, all that usual good stuff as well. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. And in the meantime, have great fun doing your own fantastic portraits.